Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into the absolutely incredible story of one of history's most influential figures, a man who went from literally hunting down a new faith to writing a huge chunk of its most sacred texts, the Apostle Paul. To really get a sense of his staggering impact, let's just start with a number, 13. That's how many books in the Christian New Testament were written by this one man. That is by far the most of any single author. So how on earth did he get there? Well, his story definitely doesn't start where you might think. You see, to really understand Paul's legacy, we have to go right back to his surprising origin. Because before he was Paul the Apostle, he was a man named Saul of Tarsus, a zealous Pharisee who saw the first Christians as a dangerous, poisonous threat that had to be eliminated. His early life was this really unique mix of influences. He was born Saul in Tarsus, a devout Jew from the ancient tribe of Benjamin. But, and this is a big but, he also held coveted Roman citizenship, which gave him all sorts of special rights. And on top of all that, he was brilliant, studying in Jerusalem under a man named Gamaliel, who was one of the most respected teachers of Jewish law in that entire era. So all this deep training, it didn't just make him smart, it made him intensely passionate. He was a Pharisee who was, in his own words, completely blameless according to the law. And he was so zealous that he saw this new Christian movement not just as wrong, but as a direct attack on God and on the traditions he held sacred. It was a threat that had to be stamped out, period. And listen, this wasn't just some academic debate for him, no way. This conviction led him down a violent path, from persecutor to apostle. He was personally pursuing these believers, setting the stage for one of the most sudden and dramatic turning points you'll find anywhere in history, all on a dusty road to a city called Damascus. And when you look at the timeline, it is just breathtaking how fast this all happened. Around the year 34 AD, Saul is actively going after the church. He's there holding the coats and giving his approval for the stoning of Stephen, the very first Christian martyr. But in that same year, while he's on his way to Damascus to arrest more believers, his life is just completely turned upside down. I mean, can you imagine? This encounter with a blinding light and a voice from the heavens changes everything. The persecutor is confronted by the very person he was trying to destroy. And from that moment on, Saul gets a new name, Paul, and a radical new mission, spend the rest of his life spreading the exact message he once tried to wipe off the face of the earth. So armed with this new mission, what does Paul do? He embarks on 3 epic journeys. He doesn't stay put. Instead, he takes on these grueling, dangerous trips to spread the Christian message to the non-Jewish world, what the texts refer to as the Gentiles. And get this, over the course of about a decade, he completes 3 of these massive missionary trips. He traveled with companions, guys like Barnabas and Silas, and they systematically moved through the major trade routes and cultural centers of the Roman Empire, planting new churches everywhere they went. But let's be really clear. These were not sightseeing tours. These journeys were absolutely filled with constant danger and just incredible events. In Cyprus, he reportedly blinds a sorcerer who was opposing him. In a town called Lystra, a crowd that first tried to worship him as a god was then convinced to stone him and leave him for dead. And in major cities like Thessalonica and Ephesus, his preaching sparked massive citywide riots. Opposition was literally his constant companion. You know, you can only stir up that much trouble for so long before it finally catches up with you. All this success and opposition revealed the true price of his belief. It led directly to his arrest. And that kicked off a years-long legal battle that would take him all the way from Jerusalem to the very heart of the Roman Empire. So he gets back to Jerusalem, and his opponents accuse him of breaking religious law. This leads to his arrest, but here's the thing. The Roman authorities couldn't actually find a solid reason to convict him. But the governor, a guy named Felix, just leaves him sitting in a prison in Caesarea for 2 full years, apparently hoping he could get a bribe out of him. So Paul's stuck. He's trapped in this legal limbo. He hears about plots to assassinate him. And that's when he pulls out his ace in the hole, his Roman citizenship. He exercises his right to appeal his case directly to Caesar, which forced the local authorities to ship him all the way to Rome for trial. Okay, so he's finally on his way to Rome, but the journey itself? Ugh, it turns into a total disaster movie. The voyage gets caught in a vicious storm that ends in a catastrophic shipwreck on the island of Malta. But miraculously, just as Paul had apparently predicted, every single person on board survived. Now, you might think, okay, that's it. He's locked up, mission over. But what's so incredible about this part of the story is that his confinement, it wasn't the end. It was the very thing that forged his lasting legacy. His prison cell basically became his new pulpit. So while he's under house arrest in Rome for 2 years, he can't travel, right? So he pivots. He starts writing. He pens some of his most profound letters, or epistles, to all those churches he'd founded. And these letters, they would eventually become scripture. He even wrote more during a later final imprisonment. Church tradition says that after a brief period of freedom, Paul was arrested a second time in Rome. And this time, it was under the rule of the notoriously brutal Emperor Nero. And you know that's not going to end well. It was there, around the age of 56, that he was ultimately executed for his faith, most likely by beheading. And this, right here, is his ultimate, incredible paradox. The man who began his career as a violent opponent of Christianity ended his life as its most prolific and important writer, authoring nearly half the books in the entire New Testament. His transformation is literally written into the foundation of the faith itself. And that just leaves us with this fascinating final question, doesn't it? His letters, so many of them written while he was in chains, became his enduring legacy. You just have to wonder, if he had never been arrested, if he'd never faced all those years of imprisonment, would his message have been as focused, as refined, as powerful? Would it have been the message that has shaped so much of Western thought for the last 2,000 years?